Hey everyone, this is Neil King, and this is another episode of Random Acts of Cartooning. This is Inktober, and I was very interested in doing a theme for Inktober. And this year, I decided to do, I'll show you what it looks like. This is my book, The Bride from Bride of Frankenstein. So my plan is to every day um, add some images to the book and just use double spreads, limited color, this kind of monochromatic, this red, and add black, darks and grays and all that stuff to it, texture. And so this is day 6 of it. So I'll be showing you where I am with this. But as always, beforehand, I like to show some type of influence for this. So I'll bring this over here. So the one I'm thinking about at this point is the classic Frankenstein illustrations by Wrightson. Unbelievably well done. And for this whole month, for these next few episodes, I'm going to focus on just the images from this as my influences. And then I'll show you how it's going per episode. Okay. So most people who are interested in illustration look at a lot of the Bernie Wrightson stuff. Beautiful illustrations. This is he's really well known for his ink work. And it's his masterpiece. Textured, so much depth. What he's doing with his cross hatching and hatching. Can't imagine the hours that he did. So this specific one I have, it's a hardbound copy. And it just goes from the actual text and illustrates some of the images from it. Beautiful faces. Look at that. Highlights. Again, focusing in on the drama of the text. So as I go through this Inktober, I have been using this as reference, and I even used like one of the images specifically. And as I go through it, I'll try to show you some of them. But it's just beautiful stuff. You could just look at it forever. So look at this beautiful image. Unbelievable. Again, when you're really checking out that, he probably reverses some of them with white, but then focuses on others where it's truly black. In the background, you can see that, and then all the hatching involved in that skin. Beautiful image. All right, so this is the influence for this one. So far, again, like I began this. This is just a sketchbook with a watercolor paper. It's about a 90-pound watercolor paper. So this is kind of the interior, just as a spread, as a title page, and all of them will be spreads. So this is page 1 with the typical character, this beautiful image, and based off of the character from the 1931, and actually this one I think was done 33 or 35 by James Whale. What we all think of is the Bride of Frankenstein with the hair and everything, with the shock of white through it. So some of it's going to be based off of that, but I'm trying to tell the story also. All right, so this is my first page, first spread, introducing the character. This is her, and she was hung. So this is in this crowd of people around there. I wanted to get that sense of it, focused in on the character. This was a big Bernie Wrightson look. He's got an image, so if not, I just was like, this is exactly how it should start. Maybe I can find it in the Wrightson part. But I just tried to keep all the focus on her. Monochromatic piece. Then we get closer. Crowd is kind of going away. Outside the gates. Another typical move. This is basically thinking from the Bride of Frankenstein film. So it's Frankenstein. They're looking for a body. They didn't really talk in the film about where the body came from. So they have I tried to establish for this one that they climb this tree where she's hung. And my influence for this one was there's a Rubens painting of a descending Christ descending from the cross. And I really, I thought about it for this. So they're pulling her down. She's descending down. Three main characters. That's the second. So third, the cat. Here's the laboratory tower. And they're bringing the body there. I used a stamp for this. Sometimes I don't know, I like it. October 4th. And this is the fifth spread. This was a crazy one. It's fun to do, but you're doubting yourself the whole time. You're like, am I going to be able to do this thing? And this is what I came up with. They're bringing the body up in the very famous that whole play in the films. Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein used this whole thing with these steps. It's whatever that set was, beautiful. I wanted to take. I didn't want to have any of this taken away from the light of the torches. Hopefully that kind of comes off. And then we're getting ready for the next one. So I have a plan, and that's where we're going to begin next, okay? Okay, so here we are. So I'm going to do this illustration. So because there's a fold, we have this gutter, it is something to think about. So I want to try this, keep this as flat as I can. If I was not filming this, I don't know if I'd need this, but because of this, I don't want to, and I'm trying to get a good view of this. I want to keep this as flat as I can. Now, whenever you do a spread like this, my whole background as an comic book artist is to push the idea of being able to focus on a frame. So I look at this as a big horizontal frame. And the horizontal frame, you have to decide where where you want the focus to be. So my plan is to kind of have the body in here and then kind of show the lab, but maybe from looking from above. Okay, so I have a couple pieces of reference and stuff. I tried to look at some images from Frankenstein and stuff like that. And I want to have all that machinery as much as I can. Again, these are supposed to be sketches, so I don't want to go crazy. So I'm just going to begin, and I'm going to start getting going with all this. Okay, so I feel like it's wise to maybe get that. I'm going to put her on a table. Again, it's hard over, the plan is that over 31 days, you're trying to get people invested in what you're doing with some of this stuff. So I'm just trying to set up that my vanishing points down here. I feel like I could put some different things up here so I don't have to fill every bit of this whole thing. And then I'm going to have her somewhere around here. So this is the body. And again, I'm trying not to overthink any of this stuff because I don't want it's supposed to be a sketch a day, and I don't want it to be, like something that I'm taking forever, like to make it into a different kind of thing than what this was all supposed to be about. So with me, I just want to get some sense of the machinery. Let me give her, I just, again, I'm not positive where I'm going to go with her. I don't want to see her. She's going to be pretty much all silhouette. So I just want to see the body. We know that she's supposed to be dead. This figure. All dealing with this perspective, right? All those points, everything's going down to your vanishing point way down here. So as much as I love what that stuff looks like, all the machinery looks like, I also realize it could be really painstaking to do all of that, because this is really kind of like a 3-point perspective here. It's coming around. But all the hoses, all these different types of electronic things that it was just beautiful. If you've ever seen the film, I feel I'm older than probably many people who are watching this. So for me, this is my childhood. They used to play all of these, old films. They were black and white, and when I was a really little kid, people still even had black and white televisions. It's all unbelievable to believe, but we didn't have a lot of different stuff. So for us, and the things that we used to watch were just these things that it could have been from the 1930s, and I love them. And but a lot of this stuff was just, they had all these amazing kinds of props and things that they had to make, and that's kind of where I kind of want to go with this, so that you get the sense of all that stuff. I don't want to have any extraneous stuff going on. I want to focus in on her. I'm going to use I have some reference again of some other things. Like, I couldn't make this stuff up, right? And you want to be inspired by all this stuff, but the idea is that this is in this lab that's all it's all this big stone, but then contrasted with all of this circuitry and all the things to bring this light, the body back to life, all electricity. So I'm just trying to use some ovals, some big things. Like, I'm gonna maybe have some wires come across, overlap some things, so you get this sense of, like, it's just filled with stuff. She's in the middle of all this. And when I do the inking part, I'm just going to try to keep it really simplistic, but you got to make it so people buy it. They're going to buy the idea that it looks, you're setting this whole thing. Again, if you're of a certain age, you would get it, but if people I'm doing images for, I'm taking it that they've never seen this before. So I want them to get the sense of what I'm trying to portray here. All right. So again, like, I'm going to keep adding, like, I'm sure when I get into this, and I just keep having to remind myself as much as I can about my perspective. It's got to all go down here. See all the lines? They're all going down. If I don't do this, it's not going to look, it's going to look really off. And I want it to have some semblance of reality as much as I can. So again, here's the scene. I've established it. I'm not sure how well you can see it on here. And then, as I usually do with all of the images that I do, I try to get in and start getting some type of detail. Now again, she's pretty much all in silhouette. I don't want, because the big payoff on this whole thing is going to be what you remember her looking like that, you know, the image of her like some kind of, I don't know, opera. Like I feel like all that stuff, she's like Nefertiti, you know, like I'll talk about these things as I might show her, but in this case, she's just a corpse. I don't want to show too much. So it's almost like she has a mask on right now, and that she's going to show us, or we'll eventually see, this figure, right? I have to try to, again, here I am in perspective. I've got to be aware of it. But again, I'm not, the way I draw, I am a cartoonist. I do my best within my style. We all have different ways of looking at things. The way I've been thinking about things recently, especially since I've been doing these more and more conventions recently, is that I have to decide on who I am as an artist and not keep thinking I'm someone else. And it's one of the most difficult things to do, like when you decide what is it that you are and stop pretending to be someone else, because I don't think your work turns out as well. So once you do this kind of a thing, and once you decide, you know, I'm a photorealistic artist, or I'm someone who's a cartoonist, and it's kind of a light style, but to make it look as professional as it can until you decide who you are, and then really do it, really put everything in, I just don't think you'll produce. And I feel like there are many projects that I do that sometimes I'm like, am I is this me, or am I just, you know, miming somebody else? And it's very hard. I look at it all the time. I look at my work, and I'm better now than I've ever been, I think. But I think it's because I'm closer to who I'm supposed to be as an artist. And I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of people to understand. I'll never be Alex Ross. I love his work. You know who he is. I'm sure I'll show some images of his. But he's a photorealistic illustrator. He does books too, does comics. But he's an incredible illustrator. Or Bernie Wrightson. I'm not Bernie Wrightson. But I like aspects of it, and I like to think that there are things I learned about him. I feel like I have a specific style for my my sketches. So that's what all this is. Not a lot of straight lines, no ruled lines. So as I'm doing this, because I'm just looking at it, I'm just like, how much detail do I need? Because once I go in with my brush pen, I could really just go after it, and then it just goes into a whole different direction. And especially when I go in with the color and all that, like, so I'm just making up all kinds of circuitry here. I've really probably deviated from a certain amount of what the reference was. I always start somewhere, and then I'm like, I kind of lose interest in it. Just want to get this idea. Again, like things that are round, some kind of tube, wires, kinds of stuff. I don't know where, again, this is all going to go. I'm not sure. But in the movie, they have just a wall of kind of cool, phony, equipment, as if as if they would need this kind of stuff if they're trying to bring this body back to life. I've seen this film, I'm sure, 100 times. I love it so much. If you've never seen it, that people compare it to, like they're not sure what's better, the original Frankenstein, which is a masterpiece, or this one, which is also a masterpiece. So again, you can see I'm just kind of laying in images, some ovals, all freehand. This is the way I work. If I was on the computer, I probably would not do it freehand. I would use the rulers and stuff that I have in the programs. So that's why, when I'm doing this stuff, it's so different, I think, than what I do on the computer for all of my books. All right, so I'm going to go in some heavier line. All right, I'm just kind of going in. I want to establish this figure. She's like the most important, and she may wind up being almost, when it's done, almost a silhouette. But I feel like if I establish some good line here, so you can really see her, that it'll make it even easier when I put a little value on her. And I keep, now it's hard for me to tell when I'm just filming this from above. So I do want to get some good stuff in here, and it's impossible for me not to look right away to try to make sure that we have good dark focus on her. So I might establish a few heavy-duty lines, stylistic, right? And then go in and keep going. Now remember, this is supposed to be a sketch. You don't want to spend like a day on this. I don't want any of these to be longer than me spending maybe an hour on it at the most. And for me, that's a long time. I don't want to make it into something it's not. You're supposed to look at this and get the atmosphere of this whole thing. So again, all you can see me doing is establishing, going with some of these things. I've made up a lot of them, influenced by the film. I don't feel like Wrightson in the Frankenstein book did as much with this kind of stuff. His was just beautiful, though. Everything he did was just so amazing. So I'm just trying to kind of lay it in so people get the idea. I think when you see these shapes that you can buy it, you're like, okay, I see what he's doing. And for my sketches, I like to think that I'm that I'm setting an atmosphere. With my brush, I'm just getting in some of these chords and stuff, but also thinking, hey, there's a highlight here, or there's something there, like establish. Like this is going to be kind of a silhouette area over here. I'm going to keep checking to make sure you can see everything I'm doing here. But if she's not the number one thing here, then it's not going to work. So I'm pushing this around, and I know that once I get in with my color, it's only monochromatic, but I'll come back in eventually and pull back some of those details that could have been lost early on when I was doing all this stuff. I like the brush that I can do these kind of textury things. That's my favorite part of the brush. I can get a strong line, but then I'm doing these great textures that it's so hard to make without a brush. You get that. Love that part. So it adds, I think, a lot to the overall feel of the piece. Eventually, the value will help too when I do all the things. Now remember, there's big stones that's supposed to be on here. Again, here's the gutter. You can see the gutter. But this, I want it all coming towards her. Again, lots of artists would do this completely different. They're probably looking at this like, I can't work like this. But the fun of me drawing is drawing like this. Like if I have to render too much, I tend to lose interest. And I didn't, I love drawing, but I don't want it to be labored. And for me, I'm not finding great happiness in rendering too much. I love the spontaneity of the line. And when it works, it can be spectacular. I'm very happy. Other times I'm always like, is that too forced? I don't want that. And again, I just think within my powers, this is the best way for me to be. I'm a big fan of so many illustrators that they just do the most refined, beautiful things. There's an artist, Wally Wood, who I love, whose backgrounds, when he does this kind of stuff, I'm just like, what an incredible technician. But for me, I'm taking little bits of that and applying it to the things that I'm doing. Again, you're just never sure where you should stop in this kind of a thing at first, because I'm just kind of moving through it. Thought I'd introduce a little lightning already. Foreshadowing things to come. And again, wires, stuff, got to be strong. Because all we want the viewer to be able to see is like, get the sense of it. What are we trying to do, This. All right. So I know I'm going to be coming in so heavy with some of this stuff. But this is kind of the setup, right? So I got, I don't know, I think it's okay. And but detail will be coming. I want to see those stones. I want to see all this stuff. And if you keep with that perspective, you kind of buy it. You're like, all right. Just enough. And, you know, the brush is giving me my atmosphere, just like I was saying. So you get it. All right. I know I'm going to come back with this brush. I do really like doing this kind of stuff. You get a chance, right? To do this kind of work. All right, so that's, I don't want to keep touching it, but all right. I'm pretty happy with that. This is a Pentel brush pen. I used Micron 0.05, right? And my Ticonderoga. All right, so that's the setup. Now next, I'm going to start the monochromatic watercolor. Okay, so what I've been doing recently is reminding everyone that I am a working cartoonist. And this is another one of the books I've done. I do all kinds of different books. And one of the ones that I do is are some kids' books. This is in all ages. So with this light, my parents are ninjas. A fun little book. Just shows what it's like to have ninja parents. I did keep a limited palette here. You can see nice, action-packed, funny, hopefully, little book. It's on my Amazon site. And hopefully you're going over there. I have the links and all the details on this video. So please check them out with many of the other things I do. My parents are ninjas. Go out there and get it. Okay. All right, so let's get going. So I'm going to pull out my trusty, cheap Prang semi-moist palette that I would use at any convention. And I'm focusing only on the monochromatic. So I'm going to go in there light to dark. Because it's this kind of paper, I'm not doing wet on wet. I'm just doing the wet on dry. And I'm never sure when you first start how strong everything is. So I'll hide in some of the areas. Now, the plan is that I want to go in and make sure that the only really super light parts are going to be on her. So that table, I think my plan is to keep the table maybe almost white, maybe the slightest bit of a pale pink, and then everything else around is going to get darker and darker and darker. So when you're going through your first pass of this, you're just like, okay, let's get this in. I'll keep going back to her and I'll keep adding. I'll have to decide how much I want her to be seen. You know, you just want to be like, this is a corpse. So in all these things, at first, I like to think that I can go really super dark. I can't have any of the highlights that I'm going to have, it has to be around her. So I don't want to have any white anywhere else than her area. So for me, I just want to kind of get it. But then, I paint in a very impressionistic way. I'm really just going after it. I want to just like get that sense. I'll go in there with my fingers and kind of move things around. I don't want to lose anything, but I also have to remind myself that that everything's got to start off with a light. If it's some type of a machinery or something, I can't have the highlight that what I would want to usually have in this stuff, because then it's going to take away from her. So everything's going to have at least a little bit of pink on it. Can't help myself. I want to put that highlight on everything. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep it all muted. This is supposed to be a waterproof brush pen, but the more you see it, they're like it's water resistant, which it very much is. I'm not saying that it just breaks down, but there's times when I'm like, that's not waterproof. But it definitely does the job. So I don't want to go, this little vignette I'm having here, I don't want it to like completely go off. Look at me, I can't help it. I want to have a highlight on there, but the highlight is really going to be a light pink at the most. So the more I do this, hopefully, the more you're seeing that that in fact all the emphasis is going to go towards that section, left-hand side of this gutter. And I keep going after it, just laying more in, laying more value in. And if you're working light to dark, it's great because you can always go darker. So if you're doing watercolor, even if it's wet on wet, which I'm not doing, this is wet on dry, it's important. See, even though I can't help myself, like I get a little dark, shouldn't. But I'm just trying to lay all this in, and I'm not sure how well you see this with the camera. Even this lightning bolt, I don't want to see this. But if you have all those values and then you put a darker value of the red, all of a sudden you're like, oh, that is pretty light. It works. I haven't even gone in with the darks. So me, I'm just like pushing certain areas where I'm like, hey, I like that to be a little darker. This will pop a little bit on a sphere like this. The highlight on the outside. This is, like I was saying, this is a 90-pound paper, and I have to keep reminding myself that at least so far it's held up. Can't see any of the marker that I go on, that micron that I use. Because every spread there's going to be something underneath or on top of, So again, layering, contrast. Variety is everything in any image, whether this is an abstract piece of art or this cartoon that I'm doing here. That's all it is. It's just a big cartoon. It's a cartoon as soon as I do it. The whole idea about me doing these videos, I've taught for a long time. And what I never was able to really do was really paint in front of my kids that I would teach. And that's the beauty of YouTube. You could watch somebody. You're like, oh, how does that was that even made? So that is the great thing about it. You're watching, and I'm sure there are plenty of artists who are like, well, that's not the way I would do it. But it is something that this is how I do it. So again, trying to get there. I haven't even gone into the real darks yet. Once I'm there and you see them, then you'll be like, oh, I like this. You can see now I can just go in, put in little bits, contrast, contrast, contrast. So those very light um, values just kind of go back. Here she is, closer and closer. Can't help it. There's a deep German expressionist side of the way I do my art, especially when I sketch. So I don't care that much about how the finish is going. I'll fight with it at the end, try to get as much of it as I can. All right, so I'm going to go after some darks now. Now when you're dipping into just black, it can be real. Look at that. It's a very big area. I like it. Staying away from her at first, and then if I think I can start doing it, I'll give her a little of this. Now for those of you probably doing Inktober stuff, I don't know, I don't think anybody, I would think that most people just want to spend a few minutes on each one. But I think I would get a little bored. No, I don't know. I could probably do it. I didn't want this Inktober thing to be just me doing a regular thing. I think I could do some of those at some point. All right, so as you see, I'm trying to establish some real darks now. Going right on top some of those values to pop everything. Well, this is where I like to think that everything that I do kind of, when I do sketches like this is kind of where all the real stuff happens. As always, I'm afraid of going too dark with some of it. I don't want it to be too dark. But got to get these things around. Just feeling this out. Just enough information. Do you read it, you know? Never sure if I'm going to love it or I'm going to be like, that was a miss. It's close. Didn't work out. But once you work in this kind of a style, you have to have confidence. So again, I'm just kind of laying in all this stuff, pulling it back anywhere that I see anything that's too light. I'm trying to go on top of. This is where I like to, especially if there's stones and stuff, to get a little difference in each one of these stones so that it reads a little bit more like a stone. I don't want to lose all this circuitry and stuff. Again, notice I'm getting right up to that. This is what I want them to look at. And I feel like the more I look at this, it's way too light. I have to go in and I have to get rid of this. It's fighting. I think it's nice to have these cool shapes, but it can't be in the way. Kind of happened when I did that other piece, the one before this, where they enter that stairwell in this thing. I had to get rid of, I had to go on the opposite side, and I had to almost get rid of everything because it's just competing. You don't want it to compete. And you risk not being able to tell what's going on this side. But for the composition, if this is fighting with it, it's not going to be any good. So again, I'm trying to get rid of anything that I feel like is competing. See how this is kind of pushing away now. It's still way too light. Can't do it. Can't have this. It's cool. Way, 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 way too light. Now again, like I can start seeing it better. Like I like it a little bit more. So again, going pretty dark, way darker up here maybe. I like texture. See, I'm just like too dark. Or I'm sorry, too light. So now I'm just getting, you can see it, but it's not, now I'm just like seeing more and more of her. I can't help it but to look at her. Focusing, focusing, focusing is not easy. I feel like the piece is starting to get really abstract. I like that. Can I keep just all the things that I've ever looked at in my life are just so refined. Comic books, that is, because they're trying to, what I keep reminding myself is that, with this, no words, right? She's just here. I want everything to be towards her. Too light, too light, too light. You got to get rid of it. I like what happened with her face. I'm seeing something, but I'm not seeing too much. Trying to keep even with my strokes in perspective. When I first started this idea of this one, I was like, I'm really going to draw all those things, all those electronics. But now I look at them, I'm just like, they're getting in the way. Can only see an indication of them. She's the star. Now it's wet. Trying not to mess it up. Every time you establish some value, you got to make sure everything's the same thing. It's gutsy. And you just want her to read as a corpse. Can't help myself. Got to get a few more contrasts even in that dark, dark, dark stuff. Right. I'm going to go back in and touch up some of her line. So it's a little bolder. Try to keep this on camera here. I'm really looking forward to every one of these illustrations. I want to do more than one a day. I do have other things to get done. I'm considering doing more of these types of things, but maybe not 30 illustrations. Maybe doing 10 illustrations of a certain theme. Maybe tell a slight story. And maybe sell them. I don't know. Who would want to buy something like this? 31 images. All right, so pretty close here. All right, so I'm gonna go in with the marker. Everything's wet, so we gotta be careful. Just have to sear a little bit stronger. And when you have this little thing, it's just every little mark is so strong. People are afraid to work this small. I mean, this is maybe 9 by 12. I don't think this is that big. But if I do this, she pops a little bit more. some semblance of reality here. I don't want to do anything to that face. It turned out pretty well. I don't have to show anything, like, it doesn't have to be more than this. I think these little details, I mean, if you would see them close, you'd be interested in them. My marker's pretty much dead. I think this is it. I might touch up slight things, but overall, I think this is her. It's fun to do. All right, so I'm going to do next episode. I'll show where I am with all this. Again, this was the one before. Here she is now. All right. Thanks for watching. See you soon.